think one of the biggest things to understand from this executive order, if you don't take anything else away from it, is the government wants to move into the world of automation. They want continuous monitoring and they want automation. They know that having terabytes, zettabytes, whatever bytes you want to call it, of data and logs that no one is looking at is a waste of time and money.
Hi, you're listening to The Secure Developer. It's part of the DevSecOn community, a platform for developers, operators, and security people to share their views and practices on DevSecOps, Dev and Sec collaboration, cloud security, and more. Check out devsecon.com to join the community and find other great resources. This podcast is sponsored by Snyk. Snyk's developer security platform helps developers build secure applications without slowing down, fixing vulnerabilities in code, open source, containers, and infrastructure as code. To learn more, visit snyk.io/TSD. That's snyk.io/TSD. On today's episode, Guy Pajani, founder of Snyk, talks to Lena Smart, Chief Information Security Officer at MongoDB. Lena has more than 20 years of cybersecurity experience. Before joining MongoDB, she was the Global Chief Information Security Officer for the international fintech company Tradeweb, where she was responsible for all aspects of cybersecurity. She's also served as the CIO and Chief Security Officer for the New York Power Authority, the largest state power organization in the country. Lena is a founding member of cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, formerly the Interdisciplinary Consortium for Improving Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity, which allows security leaders in academia and the private sector to collaborate on tackling the most challenging security issues. We hope you enjoy their conversation, and don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoyed today's episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Secure Developer. Today, we have a really exciting guest. We'll talk about bigger and broader and industry-wide views from her broad purview here on the chat. Lena, sort of no pressure here at the at the expectation setting. We have Lena Smart, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at MongoDB. Lena, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful to be here.
So, Lena, before we dig in over here, tell us a little bit about what you do and maybe a little bit of your journey into security and your current position.
So, as you mentioned, I'm CISO. I'm also responsible for governance, risk, and compliance. So, did some auditing and things in my past life. And when I started the job, the first day actually, the then CTO, Elliot Horowitz, kind of walked by and said, "You know about governance, risk, and compliance stuff, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I bet." Yeah, he goes, "Okay, good, because you're in charge of that as well." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So that was fun. He was amazing. He's one of the reasons that I came here. So I was quite happy. I quite liked having even more responsibility 3 hours into the job. I didn't have the usual path, although I'm yet to find the usual path into becoming a CISO. But I guess generally people, especially in this country, you leave school, you go to university, you do a degree, blah, blah, blah. I left school at 16. You can tell by my accent, I'm not from America, I'm Scottish. So in Scotland, you can leave school on your 16th birthday, which I did because I had to go get a job and help my mum and help support my family, my mum's family. I don't like to say that I'm self-taught because that always sounds a wee bit smug. I'd prefer to say that I've had lots of teachers and mentors along the way, and I've been very fortunate in that respect. But also I've worked long hours and I've read a lot of books and I've been in training classes and I love doing exams. I think there's something wrong with me, but I absolutely love doing exams. So
it is unusual. I will grant you that. And what was kind of the impetus a little bit for joining MongoDB, or like what was the role you moved from to this one?
So I've been in America for about 25 years, and about 17 or 18 of those years were spent working in the power industry. And I moved up from being in the help desk in the power company that I worked for, and I eventually became their CISO, and then I became CIO, and I really enjoyed that. But I just got, to be honest, I was too comfortable, and I got, I just hit a wall, and I thought,
Bored.
I always told myself, if I'm ever waking up and I don't want to do the job anymore, I'm not going to do the job anymore. And so I started to look around, and I phoned some people and said, hey, I'm thinking of making a move. And first of all, they were like, oh my God, you've been there forever. Why do you want to leave? And I'm like, because I've been there forever. I want to change. So my friend in FinTech, TradeWeb, he said, oh, we're looking for a CISO, and it's the first CISO. And I thought, oh, that would be interesting, because I worked for the New York Power Authority. I was their first CISO, and then getting the opportunity to become a first CISO again at TradeWeb. So I took that opportunity and I had a lot of fun there, set up a really good team. And after about 3 years, MongoDB approached me and said, hey, we're looking for our first CISO. And I thought, oh, this is a third chance to do something. And, I thought, I love being the first. I like not stepping into someone else's shoes, because probably you as CEO don't come up with this either, but you know how when someone gets a job and someone else has done it, and it's always like, well, Jim did it that way. Well, Jemima did it that way. Why are you not doing the same as they did? And it's like, well, they don't work here anymore. So I really liked being the first CISO, because I could create my own team. I could create my own rules in effect, and, just bring to light 25 years of experience, basically. So I came to MongoDB because I was given that opportunity again to be the first CISO. And I just really, really enjoy that, setting up the team and setting policies, looking at what's in place already, seeing, can we improve on it? Well, you can always improve on security. Mm-hmm. And, I'm never one to like empire build. I don't see the point of that. And so, I made sure that when I started, I was very clear on what my roles and responsibilities would be, and then how other teams would have like dotted lines into me, or I'd just have a really close working relationship with them. And so that's kind of how it's happened. Just kind of over the past 3 years now, we've really developed some excellent working relationships with all of the teams. So it's really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, and definitely a great and very valuable competency here. And I relate to the fact, I like to say that if you're comfortable, you're not growing. And so it sounds like you sort of share a bit of that perspective. If you're comfortable, it means you're comfy. You're not. There's nothing new that you're really challenging yourself.
No, I like.
Not as much.
Yeah. I've not heard that before. That that definitely speaks to me. I think. And you know what it's like. So I'll tell you how old I am. I'm 55. I'm an old lady. I don't think I act it. I just ran a marathon last October, which kind of amazed me that I actually finished it. But anyway, that aside, I think that when you get comfortable, you tend to start cutting corners, and you get, you're bored. You're not giving the best that you can give. And one of the other reasons that I joined MongoDB was because of their cultural values. And just a couple of these, be intellectually honest and own what you do. And I loved those two in particular. But I also think I've got a seventh one, and I don't want to sound like Pollyanna or anything, but to me, if you can't give your best every day, always, don't come to work. Phone in sick, take a mental health day, recharge, regroup, re-energize, whatever you have to do. But if you're coming to work and you're just doing it like half-assed, I'm just going to turn up for the paycheck. It's obvious to people around you, even though you think it might not be. And it's also catching. It can be infectious. Like good stuff's infectious, bad stuff's probably more infectious. It's more insidious. And so I was starting to notice when I was, just looking for that other opportunity, that I just wasn't bringing my A game. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. And it didn't last very long, to be perfectly honest. It was days. But I just wanted to get out and just start doing something more fun. And MongoDB was it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. At least, it matches a lot of steps in my journey. Lena, we have like a whole bunch of things that I want to sort of pick your brain on and get some of your learnings. The first one I want to dig into is on supply chain security. We've had several conversations about it. You're sort of outspoken around it. Just to kind of get us going, can you give us a little bit of your definition of what supply chain security is?
So, yeah, because I like to prepare for these things, because I'm a person who prepares, and I saw your questions, I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I answer this? This is a huge question. But then when I kind of broke it down, that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One chunk at a time. So this is me, one chunk at a time. And I actually wanted to make sure that I was answering this as honestly as possible. So, the whole be intellectually honest. There's so many different definitions out there that what I tend to do is I go back to my government roots, and I went back to NIST because I loved their definitions of things. And really, I took what they had defined as supply chain security and distilled it into the elevator pitch version. So here it is. Processes that protect and secure the efficient integration of suppliers to allow commodities to be produced and distributed as planned. I think that, it's a lot of big words and it's a bit of a word salad, but if you actually look at it and digest it, to me, that's exactly what supply chain security is. If you don't have policies in place, it's not going to be efficient. If it's not efficient, you're not going to be able to integrate anything, because if there's inefficiencies, people don't want anything to do with that process. So if you don't have any efficiencies, you don't have any suppliers, you have no supply chain, it falls apart very quickly. So, and also I think that the important word there is, to allow commodities to be produced and distributed as planned. There has to be a plan in place. Mm-hmm. So, and I know these sound all very matter of fact and common sense, but that sentence, that elevator pitch, probably took me maybe an hour or two of just actually thinking and drawing it out and writing it out and having a clear understanding. I don't know if you've ever read any of Richard Feynman's books, the physicist, but he had this whole thing about where you can choose a topic and you can study it. And the first step is explain the topic to a child. So I wanted to try and explain supply chain security to my mum, who's not a child, obviously, but she's not in security. And I told her this. I said, do you understand what I'm talking about here? And she's like, yeah, I do actually. Yeah. So yeah, I think
that's definitely an achievement on it, not knowing your mom sort of her background, but it's a good definition there. And I like the notion of the plan and the sort of the importance of the policies, the words that you're emphasizing. So you chose a bunch of the words actually you didn't scrutinize as the suppliers, for instance, or providers. I didn't quite catch the sort of the exact wording. How do you think about that in the context of software? Like, do you see a difference between those lines as it applies to software that you consume
and I think,
or sold versus physical goods?
So, because what I was taking was supply chain security to me is, I go right back to my power industry days and that, like supply chain visibility would be a subset of supply chain security. And an example of that would be, having built-in transparency in all processes. If you're going to allow buyers, to see all stages of the supply chain. So think of, as I say, I worked for a power company. So we used to build power turbines and we used to have to buy metal from different countries. And we would send our engineers to China or wherever we were buying the steel from. And they would actually go and look at the steel that was going to come into our plants and they would mark it. And then we could follow the actual supply chain of that steel from China to America. That to me is supply chain security. Software supply chain security, I don't think it's a subset of supply chain security. I think it's a different thing altogether because it's a different bunch of people looking after it. You don't generally have developers going to China looking at metal. You don't usually have, production engineers on a turbine looking at code. I guess you could do both if you wanted, but to my mind, they are separate. And again, I went back to NIST and I looked at the executive order of 14028, where supply chain security is defined many times. And, the government actually defined there's a pressing need to implement more rigorous and predictable mechanisms for ensuring that products function securely and as intended. And so my definition of software supply chain security would be involving the implementation of rigorous and predictable mechanisms to ensure that software products function securely and as intended. So it's almost mimicking the supply chain security, but for software. That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense because I think the concepts of it are similar. You're sort of consuming it. You need to know the plan of it, and I guess to an extent the pedigree as well, right?
Well, you've got the policy,
software equivalent of the of those X's on the metal bars.
Exactly, and like one of the reasons we use Sneak is because it's, to my mind, a predictable mechanism. I know what I'm going to get at the end of the day from Sneak. There's no guesswork. It's very clear. It's not too complex to use, and it ensures that the products function securely and as intended. And it gets back to when we go back to the supply chain security, when it's kind of hardware in the physical world, allowing commodities to be produced and distributed as planned. At that point, it's the same thing. One is a bit of metal from China and one is a piece of software from MongoDB. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the analogies. So I guess maybe like another play of words here a little bit is the difference between supply chain security, or even maybe software supply chain security, and software supply chain risk. As I know, you do GRC as well. Do you see a distinction over there?
I think so, yeah. And you'd really made me think. I don't normally get asked questions like this. I get asked fluffy questions. So these are really good questions.
It's all about philosophy here. It's we try to get it down to the practical, but you have to start from the meta, right, to understand the topic.
Exactly, I do. And you're a CEO, I'm a CISO. It's kind of rare that someone is going to ask us, I don't know, a question where you really have to sit and think about it, because, the people who work with us, for us, just assume we know what we're talking about. And so sometimes when you're asked something really as basic as what is, security versus risk, you're so used to talking at it, but it's such a high level. When you have to start doing a wee bit of a deep dive, it's good because your brain's getting used and it's like, this is why I'm doing this job. And again, back to the whole Richard Feynman thing, I keep looking up at my wall here because I've got the 4 steps of how to learn something new. And my assistant, Comey, is actually starting to go through some security training, and I'm going to be teaching her the difference between risk and all this kind of stuff. So this is interesting. So what I've said here to answer your question is, and this is just my opinion, risk is derived from an analysis of your software supply chain. That's the fundamental of it. Because I think your question was, how do I see the distinction between software supply chain security and software supply chain risk? Is one a subset of the other? So I've responded with, to my mind, risk is derived from the analysis of this supply chain. You should have performed an in-depth analysis of who does what, when, and then where the risks might arise. And then having identified those risks and basically having, created your heat map, you can then apply a risk rating to them. And that's the usual, likelihood times impact equals risk level. So to my mind, they are different. Security is what's built around the product, and risk is what comes out of it if you don't build your security properly. So yeah, it could be a subset.
Yeah, just in a different lens. Yeah, mm-hmm. I think I'm kind of tempted to get here and geek out, but I like your definition, and I've got a whole bunch of other things to sort of ask you further, so I'll proceed. But I think that makes sense. It's about sort of the use of it, and I guess you get into the notion of almost like the risks of not using a component in the process of it.
Yeah, maybe.
So you've mentioned the executive order from Biden as well, and I know you're also quite active with the IT ISAC. Yeah. That group or that organization has, done a bunch of work triggered by the Biden executive order. Can you tell us just maybe like a little bit of context about IT ISAC, what it is? I don't know if everybody knows what it is, and what is the type of work that you're doing around the supply chain management and the executive order?
So the IT ISAC, and they describe themselves as a force multiplier, and they are this amazing group of people. It's been around for about 21 years now, and they actually enable collaboration between public and private industry. And so I had and there's ISACs, so there's 16 critical infrastructure groups defined by the federal government. And the IT ISAC is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center, that's what the ISAC stands for IT. And so I used to be a member of the EISAC, which was the electric sector. And again, it's to do with information sharing. And it just brings people together who maybe normally wouldn't sit at the same table. It's recognized by DHS. So we get some of the most amazing speakers. We've had Jen Easterly come speak to us, head of CISA. We've had a couple of her deputies come and chat with us. I think Deputy Director Wolf, when he was in the position, we had Director Krebs come and speak to us. We just get some of the top people in government come chat with us about what they're working on and how we can help. And that Jen Easterly she set up so many things, but she set up the Security Commission basically to not oversee, but I think just be part of some of the policy and fundamental decision-making processes when it comes to cybersecurity for the USA. And there's some members of the ITISAC who have joined that commission. And I think it's just really important that private industry and public industry can work together in a trusted environment. Obviously before the pandemic, we were meeting in person, and I've just made so many contacts of using the ITISAC. It's an amazing resource. They have little working groups I'm a member of the supply chain risk management working group, no surprise there. And then we're also working on some other stuff as well. Some special interest groups are called, or SIGs.
Yeah, it sounds like super helpful conversations and interesting talks on it. And I guess, the Log4j conversation is also kind of curious, but are there some highlights that sort of happened when it came to after, I guess, the conversations that sort of ensued after the Biden executive order came out and sort of this context of supplier management?
Yeah, so what I did, this goes back to probably my early days as a secretary. I like to take things and put them in spreadsheets and work out how things work and how they're all linked. And so I basically deconstructed the executive order, and I sorted it into work that MongoDB could do and work that the government would have to do. And SBOMs was one thing that kind of leapt out at me as a real opportunity for MongoDB, and not just as a company, but to help the American government, remain and become more secure, because that can only help everybody. And so I think in terms of where we are with the executive order and the ITISAC, we've kind of split it up, if you like. There's little special interest groups working on specific portions of the executive order where appropriate, so that we can start to look at policy, look at the existing policies that are there, map them to things like 800, NIST 800-53 in terms of security. And again, where something already exists, don't reinvent the wheel. So share that information with government, and away we go. We don't have to spend hours and hours writing policy.
Yeah, I think I've had the pleasure of seeing some of that sort of thinking and work, and I think there's a lot of depth in it. And I know that we spoke about sort of, Sneak and MongoDB, where we can collaborate, sort of, play a role to kind of help, whether it's guide or provide some help around this. A lot of that component talks about the importance of sort of storing the SBOM, these sort of software bills and materials. Can you talk a little bit around sort of digging into that a bit? Like, how do you see that flow and the importance of capturing or sort of, handling that sort of data exchange around the SBOMs?
I think one of the biggest things to understand from this executive order, if you don't take anything else away from it, is the government wants to move into the world of automation. They want continuous monitoring and they want automation. They know that having terabytes, zettabytes, whatever bytes you want to call it, of data and logs that no one is looking at is a waste of time and money. And so that's the main thing that I got from that EO was, not only does the government want to move into the cloud, so they're going to have to start expediting the FedRAMP process, but they also want to make sure that they're going to do it right. They're going to look at zero trust. They're going to look at the SBOM process. And then I think stepping back and looking just at the SBOMs, which is something that is just fascinating to me. I think that if we were to collaborate, if Sneak and MongoDB was to collaborate, you would basically be the front end because you're providing our SBOM already. We've run Sneak through our software. We have what I would call a software bill of materials that was presented from you, and we would store that information securely in a MongoDB backend in a database. And so that to me is like the perfect marriage of products, just as because we're talking today and it's very well timed. We actually have a webinar coming up on April 19th at 1 p.m. And we're going to actually have a speaker from OWASP to talk about their framework around SBOMs, and also a speaker from NIST. And then also we're going to have Clinton Herget from Sneak on our panel. And these three gentlemen very kindly gave up some of their time a couple of months ago at Homeland Security Week, which is a big government conference in DC. And unfortunately, we had some issues, some technical issues. And so we've decided to redo this SBOM. And it's about utilizing SBOMs to enhance software supply chain security. So all the buzzwords are in there. And it's basically showing how we, MongoDB, can offer the back end, Snyk can offer the front end, and then, of course, NIST and OWASP have different frameworks. So how do we build, because people are going to want choice. The government is not going to dictate you must use one framework over the other. And so I think we're going to find that we as companies who are, let's be blunt, we're here to make a profit and make money. We're going to have to make sure that we're agile enough to look at any framework that's thrown at us. And also, to my mind, the perfect SBOM would be one that takes, almost a real-time snapshot of the way that your software, your shopping list of software is, which effectively is what the SBOM is. It's a shopping list of all of your software that's in your product. And the flow is constant. If there's a change, someone has to be notified somewhere. And so what is that flow? What does that look like? And I think that's where these frameworks are going to become very helpful. We're also looking at utilizing OSCAL, which is from NIST as well, and it's an automation language. And I think, we've got so many ideas flowing around just now. Say we are working with your product folks at Snyk to see where the best collaboration would be. And I think the first thing is going to be, building and showing what we as two companies are doing to create our own SBOMs, how we're storing them and how we're sharing that data. But then I think further on, there's going to be a need and a request, I believe, from the government of continuous monitoring of SBOMs, because they want, companies and government agencies want to know immediately when something has changed that could make their security posture less strong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think thanks for the both. It's exciting to kind of be working together, but also to on the description. And what I love about the supply chain security world is the different lenses that people bring to it. And I think above and beyond, sort of I think it's oftentimes the lenses around the discovery and kind of uncovering of what is it that is in your software. And then there is the notion of management that of continuous locally. But I think what you really kind of rightfully point out, and what supply chain security as a topic, and including this executive order, kind of really bring to bear is the need for exchanges of information, right? The needs of taking that information that used to be, I don't know if it was legitimately good enough, but people made to do with it being at best locally stored and having it be something that is much more exchangeable, which in turn creates all this need that you talked about, interchange formats and the ability to work with it, and creates even more pressure than the typical DevOps kind of fragmentation requires around different solutions to interoperate and take different phases of the process, to combine to something that is at the end of the day automatable and fast. So when you hear about a problem, you can kind of respond to it quickly.
Well, you raise a good point as well. So now my brain is just on fire, because I'm thinking, this is a great opportunity for us as companies to look and see how we can better supply SBOM information for the government. But also, there should be a way, we should always be looking to streamline these processes and keep them as clean as possible. Because my worst nightmare is that, just for talking's sake, we've got 100 government agencies and there's going to be 100 versions of our SBOM because every one of them want a separate one. Whereas the perfect world would be there's one storage space and it's secured, and the 100 government agencies have a login and they just say, I want to see the SBOM for MongoDB and I want to automate it by doing blah, blah with this API. And you've got your one source of truth, you've got your one SBOM per company in this secure MongoDB repository being created, continually monitored by Snyk, and away we go. There we go, just solved SBOMs in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It was that easy.
No, we just need to build that, It's all
we'll just. Are you free Saturday? Because,
So I think, first of all, to the audience, thanks. We dug into probably like a little bit more product talk than we typically do, but I do think that this exchange between the companies is maybe a useful lens as well to understand the problem space and kind of understand, what needs to happen in the ecosystem. I'd like to sort of switch out. We can probably talk for hours about supply chain security. It's a big, meaty topic and definitely mindful. But I'd like Lena to kind of move you maybe back a little bit into MongoDB's programs, sort of security programs that you run. And there's sort of a couple of topics that I think are especially worth raising over here. One is a bit about org structures. So, we talked about how you run, you're the CISO, including GRC. And I believe that in MongoDB, the product security team is separate. It's not a part of your organization. It's more part of the technology part of the org. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, just like lay of the land, how do the responsibilities split roughly? And then just talk a little bit about how do you interact between the groups, given they are two lenses on security in some respect? Do you align? How do you collaborate?
Sure. So, first, let me be absolutely clear. All aspects of security are my ultimate responsibility, up to and including physical security. And so, even though we have product security rolling up into the chief product officer's house, as the CISO, I take full responsibility for our security programs, products, and posture. And maybe that's different for other CISOs, but that's what I signed up for. I actually enjoy that responsibility. And it's that one throat to choke. It's what the board expect. It's what I expect. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, very important clarification. Yeah.
So the lay of the land basically is our product security team, led by the amazing Ben Cefalo, folds up into the chief product officer, who is Sahir Azam. And we meet daily, probably. Ben, I think, is in an airplane or on vacation or something this week. Otherwise, I'd be talking to him every day. We are absolutely not siloed, even though we're separate groups. We have a great collaborative relationship with his entire team, to the extent that he will help me interview members of my team for jobs and vice versa. So, we're on the same interview panels. We've discussed systems development lifecycle and security within that, and we help each other understand the business needs. For example, for FedRAMP, we've worked absolutely hand in hand on our FedRAMP project. I think, and I know this is not the same for all companies, this is my opinion, I think having two separate teams that work very closely together is better in some ways for our business, because the head of product security, Ben, can focus completely on that task. And, he's going to report his findings into the chief product officer. So we're able to shift very quickly if a customer requires a security tweak for our products, for example. It's not to say that we're not going to have the same level of agility if that team was under me, but I just feel that the product security team's focus is solely on the security of our customer-facing products, and that gives our customers the white glove attention that they expect. And I wouldn't like to think that would be diminished if they did move under me, but to be honest, I don't see the need. I said at the beginning, I'm not an empire builder. I never have been. I prefer, if something is working, why break it? If it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. And I just really enjoy the relationship that, that Ben and I have. There's a whole team under him who they're just fantastic. And we actually had one person move from my team into product because we felt that would be a better fit. Ken White, our cryptographer, another genius. We took the business decision that he would be better placed and would probably have better career opportunities in what he was doing to move over into product. And I like that as a company, MongoDB actually encourages moves like that, lateral moves, where if you're maybe stymied in what you're doing or you just want to do something a wee bit different, there's always these opportunities to move within teams as well.
Yeah. And do you find, if I go off script here for a sec, do you find the measurement changes when you think about the two organizations, when you're ultimately responsible for security risk? And so to an extent, you need to encapsulate whatever metrics, whatever measures of security that come from product security into yours as well. Do you almost like quantify or assess, security programs, security risk that's involved the same way between the groups? Do you need to?
No, it's under the risk organization. And this is where it's a very matrixed organization. It's a very matrixed company. And so GRC reports into me, but they, their reach is wide. They meet with our product people. We have a kind of formal quarterly meeting, but our security folks and GRC folks are talking with the product folks on a daily basis. So, we basically treat product security and product risk all under my umbrella.
And do you think there's any downside to this split? I can see the upsides. Also, past conversations talked about the maybe greater affinity. You were alluding to it as well, rolls into the chief product officer, which is in charge of a variety of other aspects of the product. So as you said, you can more easily adapt and sort of build security capabilities in it. As long as the collaboration between the two of you works, do you think there's any downside? They might be outweighed by the upsides, but are there any downsides to this split?
No, because I'm really enjoying your questions. And as I said, I did want to prepare properly for these. So I have been giving these a lot of thought. And short of me being an absolute control freak, and yes, ideally I would love everyone to report into me, then, no, I'm just kidding. But I am a control freak. I really couldn't think of a con. I think we have such a good working relationship with these folks. I can see where maybe if it was a different makeup, if it was different people who wanted to just do their own thing and be left alone and not have to talk with the CISO and her team ever, yeah, that could be tricky. But I think the fact that we've got such, a culturally aware company, and especially within product and product security, customers are first. And really, a lot of the calls that I'm on with our customers, and I'm sure you get brought into these as well, our customers just want to be reassured that we're working together, that we're collaborating, and that there's openness and transparency. And we have that already. So, I don't think there's any need for these folks to move under me.
That's awesome. So super interesting on the product security split on, and it sounds like it's working well. I guess it always comes down to people. Maybe let's talk about maybe some other security programs or work that you're doing. Specifically one that I've been hearing more about is your Security Champions program. So, we hear a lot about security champions in this podcast, but typically it comes basically under that sort of product security mantle. They're talking about security champions in spots that are very like AppSec minded. And I think yours is a bit broader. So can you tell us a little bit, first, what is this program? Tell us a bit about its history, and then we'll dig a little bit about effects.
So this is a program that I've been running since I moved to America, since I started to work in security full time, basically. I always had an understanding that people were fascinated with security, and they've continued to be, because it is one of the most fascinating fields to work in. But it's really hard to get into it because for some reason, it just seems difficult for people to break into security sometimes. And I wanted to break that boundary. I wanted to break that barrier. And so when I joined MongoDB, probably 6 months after I joined, which was 2.5 years ago, I thought it would be really good to have a Security Champions program. And we did start one, and we had probably 20 or 30 people join it. I think Ben from our communications group, I think he was one of our first people to join it, which was great because that then helped to get the word out. But then COVID hit, unfortunately, obviously 2 years ago. And so we put it on the back burner. And we decided we'd take a wee look at it when things were less up in the air. And so probably a year ago, we realised, look, COVID's here to stay for a while, unfortunately. We're going to just work our way through this, and we're going to start the Security Champion program again, SCP. And we did it properly. We got buy-in from the top. I had Dave Itticheria, our CEO, announce at one of our all-hands meetings that we were restarting the Security Champions program. And he was encouraging people. Again, they're volunteers, and they had to have their supervisor's permission to join. So that was the two kind of prerequisites. You have to volunteer. Nobody can make you join it. And if you do want to join it, your boss has to say it's okay. So it started properly about a year ago. We hired a full-time person. His name is Felix, and he runs the program for us. We now have over 90 volunteers in the company, about to hit 100. So we're going to have a special prize for that person. Our volunteers, our champions, spend about 2 hours a week. That's the minimum expectation to learn about security and to continue to learn. And we have monthly security-related meetings. We have a whole education program around it. We have folks who are super, super duper technical, and we have people who are learning right at the beginning of their career about security. And it's quite interesting bringing those groups together, because people who live and breathe security 24/7 sometimes have a very myopic view of the world, and people who are just coming into it have got all these ideas that we wouldn't have even thought about. It's like, wow, this is amazing. We have hackathons, we have movie nights, and basically we see these security champions as our eyes and ears for their group and their department. So
it's a really compelling kind of a mindful of think security mindset and permeating those. And clearly you're sort of getting an allocation of a couple of hours. By the way, are they kind of doing those 2 hours above and beyond their day job, or is that where the boss approval happens of this being
That's generally why we ask for approval, because if the person is like doing 40 hours a week of hardcore coding and their boss is like, there is no way you're going to have 2 hours extra to give up on this, then that's setting expectations. I don't think we've had anyone who's been told they can't join. So people are either making time for it themselves, and we do try and accommodate meetings. We do try and have them at lunch times or evenings, or when things are not
a little bit of your time, really, you're volunteering, but accommodation from your manager on it. And do they have any formal, beyond thinking about it, learning about it, and maybe the sort of serendipitous sort of insights that they would offer, do they have any actual kind of different security responsibilities in their teams? Are they the kind of the representative of their team to the security team, or is there sort of official role that they take as well?
I wouldn't say official, because then we get into the whole HR thing. I would say it's more a trusted source. So we see the champion as a trusted source for their group, and they help define and maintain our security program. So just to give you an example, we do phishing, as everyone does. And, the first couple of phishing emails we sent out, they were rubbish. It was so obvious they were phishing, and, some people clicked on them because some people click on everything. And so what we did was we wanted to use the champion program to define phishing emails that would be harder to detect, but not annoying, and not those where, 2 weeks before Christmas, click here to find out what your Christmas bonus is. It's like, no. We want it to be, culturally sensitive, and for people to have an awareness that if they clicked on the email, bad things could have happened. But we didn't want to talk down to people. We didn't want to make it too technical or too simple. And so to get that balance, we basically said, okay, it's a competition, security champions, whoever comes up with the best idea for the phishing email, we gave them an Amazon gift voucher or something. And we got some brilliant suggestions, and we ended up using 2 of them. And, some of the metrics that we can use are the click rate going down? And we've found that it is, which is good. But you have to very much temper that with what email have you just sent out. Is it in fact just a slightly easier one than the last one that less people are going to click on? Or is the Champions program actually helping make it more obvious that people shouldn't be clicking on links? It's one of these really hard metrics. So it's like if more people click on the email, it was a really good phishing example. And if less people click on the email, was it just too simple? Or are people actually getting the message not to click on things? It's a really, we could do a whole talk on phishing as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And on measuring security, which is its own kind of worms of what would have happened. It sounds really kind of compelling, I guess, as it's just sort of engaging people in the journey. And I love the kind of crowdsourcing creativity there on security. I've got this warm spot in my heart for swag. Do you have any dedicated swag for the security champions? Do they get a t-shirt or something on it?
We do. I've actually got my security t-shirt on, which is, I don't know if this is being videoed, but anyway, we've got the MongoDB leafy, but it's a thumbprint. So, and then we also have a smaller version of that just says SCP, Security Champions Program. So yeah, we've got swag. Of course we do.
That's awesome. I love, we had all the way back, one of the early episodes talked about sort of a swag-driven security and the motivation that you can do for it.
And it's not just swag. I mean, this is actually enabled, I think it's 2 or 3 people now have actually moved from their job within MongoDB into the security team or into the governance, risk and compliance team, because they really enjoyed what the program was doing. They had a good understanding of the business. And for me to take a person who's got 5 years experience of working in MongoDB and understands their area of the business, for me to teach them security or GRC, it's going to be an awful lot easier than bringing someone from the outside in. So we're using this also as a feeder program for people who want to work in security or GRC within MongoDB.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sounds super practical and helpful and drives diversity and other goodness on it. So thanks, Lena. There's probably, again, I could probably kind of pick your brain here for a long while, but I think we're kind of running out of time. So I have one final question that I like to ask every guest joining in, my open-ended question, which is, say you had unlimited budget and resources to tackle one sort of industry problem, some security, presumably. What would that be? And I guess if you have it, and you want to share, which direction would you take to try and take it on?
So, I think the biggest bugbear for me is passwords for everybody in the world, not just for people in security. And I did do some research on this. So what I'd want to find is a wearable that holds all my passwords securely, and it can be scanned or used via an app, but it's not a big, ugly NFC ring, because I've looked at those rings and they're ugly. I don't like them. So something elegant that will hold my passwords.
Very pragmatic, and the problem that we can all relate to as they explode in quantity and
yeah, I don't know. Obviously, if we could have solved the passwords thing, we'd be bajillionaires and would be lying on a beach somewhere.
It's all good. It's always good to sort of point to a problem, and at the very least, maybe there's some good product ideas that come out of it. Lena, thanks for coming onto the show and sharing all these great learnings and insights.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope you join us for the next one.
Thanks for listening to The Secure Developer. That's all we have time for today. To find additional episodes and full transcriptions, visit thesecuredeveloper.com. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved in the community, find us on Twitter at @DevSecCon. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoyed today's episode. Bye for now.